מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא אחסר, בנותש יביצני, עמי מנוחות ינהלני, נפשי ישובב, ינחני במקלי צדק, למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא יירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשם בראשי כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I want to take a moment before Rabbi Rudin Luria gets up to speak to offer my deepest condolences to the family and to all of Lois's friends, to all of us, who all felt like we were Lois's family. She was an extraordinary woman, strong, opinionated, but so loving, devoted to the people who were a part of her life, family and friends, dedicated to community, passionate about her Judaism. A woman who lived by principle, stood for what she felt was important, who was a doer and an accomplisher, and who brought such light and joy everywhere that she went. It's appropriate that we say goodbye to Lois now, during these days before Hanukkah, because you were a great light burning in our lives. I hope that we all continue to feel that light of her presence and to be inspired by her.
Every single year we read the Torah and we rejoice at its end, even though the final section details the death of our leader Moses. Upon its completion, we joyously return to the beginning and start to read the Torah from its opening. Judaism teaches that our lives are like a book. Our actions and words are recorded. Just as we gathered at B'nai Yeshurun this past Shabbat morning for our Sisterhood Shabbat, and all the Sisterhood past presidents joined together for a Torah blessing. It's just at that time that we lost our beloved Lois. Even with all of her ailments, overcoming so much loss, it's still hard for us to grasp because Lois was so strong, so full of life and love. But we also know that she was ready. We know that she goes home, rejoining her beloved buddy, her one true love, and her two boys, Evan and Paul. The rabbis imagine Moses crying while writing the final chapters of the Torah telling of his own death. And so it is for us today. Though Lois's book is sealed with our tears, we must rejoice because we now have the opportunity to share her book from the beginning. to celebrate Lois, the life that she lived. Perhaps we should use a kaleidoscope to see the immense beauty of her life. Lois has departed from this world with a good name, at peace, at the age of 89, leaving behind many in mourning, her brother Marshall, so many adoring nieces and nephews and great-nieces and great-nephews, Judy and Bruce, Roberta and Bill, Michael and Maria, John, Mindy and Rick, Kirsten, John, Liz, David and Sam, and so many friends. As you know, Lois was a collector of many fine things: kaleidoscopes, art, books, rocks from her travels with Buddy, and most especially she was a collector of friends. Lois now joins her parents, Eva and Sam Grad, her aunt and uncle, Pauline and Morris, better known as Mom and Pop, who raised her after her mother died when Lois was just 7 years old. She joins Bernard, her buddy, her beloved husband of 54 years, who's already left this world 14 years ago. Her boys, Evan and Paul, tragically taken from this world, each at such a young age. She joins them all in their eternal home in heaven. We have some very special family tributes. I'd like to first call up her brother Marshall.
First of all, can everybody hear me? Okay. First of all, I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here today and paying respects to my sister, Lois. In 2005, a few months after Buddy passed away, I sat down to write some words about Lois because I didn't know how long she would be around. As I have recently reviewed those words I wrote back then, I decided that they would not do today. I found some of them trite and cliched. So how does one describe a mother who lost her 2 sons? How does one describe a wife who lost her husband of almost 54 years? How do you describe Lois Klein? If I only had one word to describe her, it would be that she was a fighter. However, she was more than just that. She was a friend to many people. She was a woman who fought for her children, a woman who fought for her husband, a woman who fought for her friends, and yes, a woman who fought for herself. She didn't back away or back down. Lois was opinionated at times, and yet determined. She let you know where she stood. She could be stubborn and unwavering. She didn't like people telling her what to do, nor did she like people telling her that she couldn't do something. She was a survivor. Despite setbacks, disappointments, and tragedy, she carried on. She persevered and she lived life in spite of what happened. She had many friends, as evidenced by the number of people who attended a surprise 70th birthday party in her honor. There are those who make an impact on our life. Lois was one of those people. From her activities and influence at the temple to the mahjong classes she taught and the tournaments she held. She was honored by the city of Beechwood, which interviewed her and then published an article about her. Lois Isabel Grad Klein was born on May 6, 1930 in Detroit, Michigan. 2 days before her 7th birthday, her mother passed away at the age of 35. Not being able to raise a child by himself, her father eventually sent Lois to New York and was raised by his brother and sister-in-law. They gave and made her a wonderful home. For years, though, Lois resented her father for sending her away to New York. Why didn't he want me? She asked. It wasn't until some 80 years later she found out that from a relative on her mother's side that it was her mother's dying wish that she be raised by someone in her family. No relative of her mother wanted Lois. So her father sent her to New York. When Lois found out the circumstances of her being sent to New York, she finally understood, and the resentment dissipated. 6 years later, Lois's father remarried, and 2 years after that, they had a son. That son is standing before you today. Lois and I had the same father, but different mothers. And we grew up in different places, under different circumstances. Lois remained in New York with her aunt and uncle, while I grew up in Detroit. In a number of respects, Lois had some of the same traits as our father, though she might not admit it. Among them was Lois's competitiveness. She loved to win at anything she did. She didn't like to lose. She gave her all. She didn't give an inch. From playing cards to playing Scrabble, I rarely beat Lois. And I do mean rarely. It was quite frustrating. And for a person of 89, her mind was still as sharp as ever, right up until the end. When my son and I visited her in January of this year, we talked about her situation. The cancer was not affecting her yet. She told me that she did not want to have surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation. She wanted to let nature take its course, hoping that there wouldn't be a lot of pain. She wanted to live out her remaining days with as good a quality of life as possible. She wanted to enjoy her life as much as she possibly could, knowing that the end would eventually come. She accepted her situation and said that she had a good life. As I said earlier, she lived life, and she lived it on her terms, and she wanted it to end on her terms. This was Lois Klein. In 1951, Lois and Buddy married in New York, and in 1960, Lois and Buddy moved to Cleveland with their 2 sons. For nearly 60 years, I have been coming to Cleveland to visit. The first visit was the year they moved here. I came here with my father and my mother, and I have been coming here ever since, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. Lois was a great cook. My mother often asked why I would want to eat what Lois made and not what she made. The answer was simple. My mother was not a great cook. Pancakes on Sunday morning. Don't get me wrong, I didn't starve at home. My mother's cooking was okay, but Lois's cooking was sublime. I loved coming here, but in recent years the visits had become too infrequent, and it has been my fault. I stayed away. I avoided visiting. Phone calls became fewer, and she admonished me for that. There were numerous times when I felt as an older man being treated by my older sister as still a teenager. I should have put those feelings aside and visited more often, but I found it difficult to do. However, in all that time, I never let her know how I felt. Now I have come to say goodbye. There will probably be one more visit, but after that there will be no more. And it is sad for me. As Paul Simon wrote in the song Bookends, preserve your memories. They're all that's left you. Well, I have mine. Goodbye, Lois. I will miss you.
Now call up niece Judy, followed by her sister, also niece Roberta.
Lois was my aunt, my youngest one, just 18 years older than me. We met when I was 2. Not that I remember, but she certainly did. Her extraordinary memory produced many anecdotes and insights about family, both her own side and my Uncle Buddy's. She was steadfast and loving, helping the rough gem that was Buddy to reveal many polished facets in his adult life. Together they were amazingly resilient, as you know, surviving the tragic loss of both their children. And then she lost Buddy 14 years ago and still managed to go on living and reaching out to others. Her ability to recognize the human warmth in everyone she encountered made her beloved by many. I will miss her so much. There were our girls' weekends every February. Once we made a Valentine's Day kimono out of a shower curtain decorated with hearts and glitter. There were our quilt show and museum expeditions, this with my sister who will speak next. There were our visits together on Cape Cod. There were Scrabble games and of course 5 crowns. Every time we play 5 crowns, we think of her, and we will continue to do that. Today is my birthday, and we are burying someone I loved dearly and for so long. I hope to never have a sadder birthday than this one.
I'm Judy's sister, Roberta, and Lois's niece. And when I was thinking about what to say about Lois, I thought of that verse about the values of a virtuous woman from Proverbs 31:10. So I decided to rewrite it slightly for her. Who can find a virtuous woman, for her value is far above rubies. She brings food, knowledge, compassion, caring for her family and friends. She plants a garden and feeds the birds. She seeks fabrics, silks, and wool, and works with her hands to make clothing, jewelry, needlepoint, macrame. She makes and strings beads, blows and molds glass, and takes great pleasure in making and teaching. She buys art, supporting local artists, and collects hundreds of handmade kaleidoscopes from all over the world. She enjoys playing cards and mahjong at home and on cruises. She teaches the game in informal gatherings, classes, and runs many tournaments to raise money for various causes. She summons her strength to withstand the blows of fate and thinks of others in her grief. She stretches out her hand to the poor. She reaches forth her hands to the needy. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She reaches out in friendship to neighbors, managers, drivers, health aides. She does whatever she can, whether stopping to make friends with someone new at Wiggins or handwriting thank you notes to donors in the community. She supports the temple, donating art in honor of her sons and husband and giving generous funds. She serves as temple librarian, head of sisterhood. She sits among elders on many temple, Wiggins, and community committees. Her relatives call her blessed and beloved. Her friends praise her. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates.
And our last family tribute is by great-nephew John.
When I first came to Cleveland as an excited 9-year-old in 1996, I had no idea how formative that experience and over the next 23 years, the multitude of experiences that I had would be with my Aunt Lois. Flying alone for the first time and arriving to stay with my grandmother's brother and his wife, I'm not sure I recall my expectations exactly. Attending an Indians game with them, going to Classic Car Museum, eating far too much ice cream. When I came back to Boston after that initial trip, I wanted to spend more time with Lois and Buddy. There's so many adjectives to describe the force that Lois Klein was. For all of us here in attendance, she wore many different hats, both literally and figuratively. She was equal parts friend, teacher, lecturer, conversationalist, student, historian, wife, mother, artist, curator, the list goes on and on. More than anything, though, her influence on me personally was that of providing so much advice and wisdom, of giving unconditional love, and also, unfortunately, of the acute realities of life's painful moments, the struggles that face us, yet the perpetual search for optimism and positivity that she exhibited. As my wife Kristen and I visited her over the last few years, even after Paul and Evan had passed away, after the death of her beloved Buddy, she had a love for living life and enjoying each day. Lois loved her friends and family with tremendous fervor, and she gave her opinion and perspective on the things that she cared about with the kind of passion as to embarrass ambivalence. Regardless of whether or not you wanted to hear it sometimes, she would give honesty and realism in healthy doses, then a smile, a laugh, a hug, and a kiss. She taught me to never go to bed angry and to marry someone at least as smart, if not smarter than you. She taught me to agree on absolutely nothing, but to respect each other enough to move past the differences. She taught me about rocks and kaleidoscopes, about glass blowing and jewelry, about tone and inflection when speaking, about Cleveland and its history, about relationships and what love and dedication are fundamentally about. Our miss our weekly Skype calls, miss the times that we spent sitting and talking for hours, of the stories she shared about her remarkable accomplished life, about Buddy, her companion and partner. She lived a full and rich life, and I'll choose to remember all of those times, all of the wisdom, all of the memories of her. We say goodbye to Lois today, but I believe that I will carry her in my heart and soul for the remainder of my life, and I encourage you all to do the same. It's what she would have wanted, to know that she positively affected us all, and that she loved us, and that will be the legacy that she leaves. I'll finish with some words from Henry Scott Holland, which I've always found rather poignant. Death is nothing at all. It does not count. I have only slipped away into the next room. Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as I was. I am I, and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of the mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well. Nothing is hurt. Nothing is lost. One brief moment, and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again.
I have one last tribute. This is from Rabbi Stanley and Dr. Lifsa Schachter from Israel. We would like to add our condolences on Lois's death. She was a dear friend who maintained close contact after our Aliyah to Israel. Lois had many gifts. She was artistic and creative, and as we all know, she built a good life despite the many knocks life brought to her and Bud. It always moved us greatly that she could take pleasure in our children and grandchildren. We miss her dearly. Stanley and Lifsa. Lois was a force of nature. She lived life with a flair. Nurturing, thoughtful, and loving, you always sought her out for advice because she'd tell you what you needed to hear. Generous to a fault and philanthropic, you could call her the Energizer Bunny. Tenacious and spirited, when she set her mind to something, she made sure it was done, and it was done right, and she knew the best way to do it. She was very bright, constantly learning, always asking for the data. She told you what to do. She was your navigator on the road, better than any GPS, a constant guide for so many throughout life. She was a mentor. She loved people. She needed to be with people, whether it was at Sisterhood or PTA or Mahjong or cruise ships. Lois liked to be in charge. And you may know she was running a campaign for president, not yet for the United States. But Lois was running for the Wiggins Tenant Association presidency. She even had a campaign manager because she felt she had more to give, new ideas to make Wiggins even better, to help the residents live in a more positive and constructive way, as she told me. Lois was an inspiration for all of us. Creative, artistic, talented, a graduate of FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology, she began her career as a designer, and that mannequin from FIT stands in her apartment wearing a Lois design. She always surrounded herself with beauty, all the art and all the people. She loved sharing her art, her paintings, telling the story of each piece, giving away her creations, the jewelry that she made, teaching others how to make it, most especially those exquisite paper beads. Lois met her buddy on a blind date, arranged by a friend. Lois was reluctant to go, and her friend basically forced her out the door. For Lois, it wasn't love at first sight, but Buddy was smitten, telling a friend that night, "She's the one I'm going to marry." And Lois kept shooing him away. But thankfully, Buddy was persistent. For 9 months, he kept after her. As Lois would say, "I couldn't get rid of him, so I married him." They fit just perfectly together. They balanced each other. They supported each other. Even when riding on the subway in New York, Buddy would rest his chin on top of Lois's head. They were destined to be together. Buddy was her prince. He would do anything for her. Like that time they were walking in Manhattan and they passed a woman wearing an immaculate jacket. And Lois turned to Buddy and said she wanted a coat just like that. So Buddy approached the woman and bought it right off of her back, saying, "My wife needs that jacket." And Lois and Buddy loved to travel. As you know, they traveled the world. They attended many elder hostels. But it happened once that one of the elder hostels that they went to, the room was not up to Lois's level of accommodations. So Buddy went to talk to the manager, and he said this: "I have been sleeping with my wife for 40 years, and because of your room at this hotel, I will not be sleeping with my wife for the first time ever. I'm not sleeping apart from my wife tonight." And guess what? They got a new room. You heard Lois was a cover girl, the front page story of the Beechwood Buzz in 2017. Buddy and Lois were incredible leaders in our congregation at B'nai Yeshurun Temple on the Heights. Sisterhood president, they dedicated our youth lounge in memory of Evan and Paul. Lois recently donated the hearing loop for our Moskowitz sanctuary, and she even was a member of our synagogue team. It happened that one of the boys came home from Hebrew school and said, "We have a library, but no librarian." Lois replied, "Don't look at me. I'm not a librarian." And the boys said, "We need one." So guess what? Lois became Temple on the Heights librarian. She was a strong advocate of everything Cleveland: art, theater, music, restaurants, organizing all different outings, an avid reader. And when I visited her just on Thursday, she was reading 2 books at the same time, sharing her campaign strategy with me and her plans to see the next exhibit at the Art Museum. At Wiggins and Menorah, she was home. It was tough for her to leave Ridgebury and the community of that neighborhood. She had to make sure to sell the house to the right person, and she did. At Wiggins, for these past 5 years, she had so much fun, so busy, so appreciative of the staff. She knew them all and their families. Despite all of her life challenges, she felt blessed, and we were certainly blessed by all that Lois gave to us. Her time, her talents, her treasures. She sure was busy. I'd have to book my visits with her weeks in advance. Lois was defined by family and volunteering, by community. She brought people together with overlapping circles, her vastness of community. She loved so much when the family would come to visit. She counted down to the days till the visit. We knew all about it. And then for weeks after, she'd recount all that you did together, and we know all about it. It was truly a highlight that she relished, just being with all of you. You were her life, and you gave her so much joy. Lois showed us all how to be a loyal friend, always resourceful with that inner strength and resilience. She lived a long and beautiful life and left us all still wanting more. May her name always be a blessing. Amen. We'll rise now as Cantor Schiffman leads us in the memorial prayer.
מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת ליבה בת שמו וחווה שלך לעולמה. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם, ענה בעל הרחמים. אז תראה בסדק כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure, to Liba, to Lois Klein, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May she merit the reward for living a life filled with kindness, love, and righteousness. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated. Following this service, interment will take place at B'nai Yeshurun's Chesterland Memorial Park on 306. And then family will receive friends following the burial at 2612 West St. James Parkway in Cleveland Heights. That's a home that the family has rented these days because all the families from out of town. Again, 2612 West St. James Parkway. I'll be sitting today until 8 p.m. When we return from the cemetery, we'll daven the evening service upon arrival back at the house. The family will also be sitting tomorrow from 7 to 9 in the evening. We'll hold an evening service at 7 p.m. Those that wish to contribute in Lois's memory can do so to the Klein Family Youth Activities Fund at B'nai Yeshurun, to the Bernard and Lois Klein Fund at Wiggins, care of Menorah Park, or to PanCan for pancreatic cancer research.